Do you think masturbating is harmless? That it's just a natural way to ease desire and relax the body? What if I told you your brain may be interpreting this habit as a forced pleasure cycle, one that, over time, starts stealing your energy, your motivation, and even the firmness of your erection? The truth is, masturbation, when done in balance, is healthy. But when it turns into automatic repetition, it stops being pleasure and becomes a silent drain on vitality. The problem isn't the act itself, but the frequency and the way it happens. The body was made to experience pleasure as a complete process: desire, arousal, connection, and climax. But when pleasure is reduced to quick, isolated, constant stimulus, the brain starts to adapt. It learns it can get dopamine, the hormone of motivation and pleasure, the easy way, and stops seeking it from other sources. That's how the dependence cycle begins. Dopamine is like a currency. The more you spend without giving your body time to replenish, the poorer in energy you become. And every intense dopamine dump, like what happens during masturbation, requires recovery. When that recovery doesn't happen, the brain goes into defense mode. It reduces sensitivity to pleasure, cuts down desire, and leaves you feeling drained, unmotivated, and often unwilling even to connect with others. After your 30s or 40s, this effect is even more evident. Hormonal metabolism is slower, testosterone no longer renews as quickly, and the nervous system needs more time to balance dopamine and prolactin. The result? Pleasure demands more stimulus, but the body responds less and less. And men start confusing this with loss of virility, when in fact, it's the body asking for a pause. Masturbation is healthy when it serves pleasure. It becomes a problem when pleasure starts serving masturbation. And that's the difference I want to talk about today, because that's where the line between balance and burnout lives. I'm Emily Collins, a urologist, and in this video I'll explain exactly when masturbation stops being healthy and starts stealing your potency. But before we continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel, because here I talk about male sexual health with scientific grounding and without taboo. And tell me in the comments, have you noticed your energy drops after masturbating frequently? Biologically, masturbation is a fascinating phenomenon. In seconds, the male body triggers a sequence of chemical and neurological reactions that involve virtually every system: nervous, circulatory, hormonal, and muscular. It's a true biochemical storm, pleasurable, intense, and, if balanced, healthy. The problem is that, when repeated too often, the same storm wears the system down instead of strengthening it. It all starts in the brain. When sexual stimulation begins, the nervous system releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter of desire and reward. This substance awakens the body, speeds up the heart, dilates blood vessels, and prepares the penis for erection. At that moment, testosterone joins in, reinforcing arousal and sexual drive. It's as if the whole body switches to action mode, a perfect symphony between mind and body. At climax, there's a chemical explosion. Dopamine, oxytocin, adrenaline, and endorphin are released at once. This mix creates the pleasure, relaxation, and euphoria a man feels right after orgasm. But as soon as climax ends, the body changes state. The brain releases prolactin, the hormone that switches off desire and forces the body into rest. It's as if the body said, "That's enough, I need to recover." This swing between dopamine and prolactin is natural, but when a man masturbates multiple times per week, or even per day, the brain is forced to repeat this cycle excessively. The result? An overtaxed dopaminergic system and a body that starts operating on an energy deficit. Testosterone dips, real desire fades, and pleasure comes bundled with fatigue. Another key point is nutrient expenditure. Semen is rich in zinc, selenium, magnesium, and proteins, all essential for testosterone production and cellular regeneration. With every ejaculation, the body uses part of these reserves. If food and rest aren't adequate, replenishment doesn't happen. That's why many men report loss of vigor and firmness when the habit becomes too frequent. Masturbation, done consciously, can be a form of self-knowledge and even anxiety control. But when it turns into an automatic discharge, it starts sabotaging the very system it should balance. And that's exactly what I want to explain now: how overstimulation creates a cycle of short pleasure and prolonged fatigue, and why that's the point where masturbation stops being healthy. Dopamine is the fuel of pleasure, but it's also the easiest system to throw off balance. It's the neurotransmitter of motivation, focus, desire, and the sense of achievement. Released in controlled doses, it makes you feel alive. Trigger it constantly, as with excessive masturbation, and it starts to fail. The pleasure that used to energize you begins to drain you. Every time you masturbate, the brain releases a burst of dopamine. That surge brings immediate pleasure, but the body wasn't built to sustain such frequent peaks. After orgasm, the brain needs time to rebalance dopamine and prolactin, but when stimulus is constant, that time disappears. The brain enters chemical saturation. It senses overload and, to protect itself, reduces sensitivity at dopamine receptors. It's like the body puts on a brake to avoid a crash. The result? You start to feel less pleasure, less motivation, and a greater need for stimulus. It's the same mechanism as any dependency: the more the brain is stimulated, the more it needs to feel the same effect. A man enters a cycle of short pleasure and prolonged depletion, and often, without realizing it, turns masturbation into a habit-masked addiction. Over time, this dopaminergic desensitization affects much more than pleasure. Focus drops, creativity fades, mood swings, and energy sinks. It's common to feel unmotivated, to avoid socializing, and to struggle getting aroused with real partners. The brain chases easy, fast, predictable pleasure, losing interest in true pleasure that involves connection and emotional stimulus. After your 30s or 40s, the impact is greater. Dopaminergic recovery is slower, and excess stimulus becomes mental and hormonal fatigue. You wake up tired, feel mentally heavy, and pleasure stops recharging you, it starts draining you. The cycle of excessive masturbation is a pleasure illusion. The brain believes it's being rewarded, but in reality, it's losing the capacity to feel. And when pleasure stops generating dopamine, it starts to steal. But this process can be reversed, and it begins with understanding the biggest villain of the cycle: pornography. And that's exactly what I want to show now: how pornography hijacks your brain and destroys your ability to feel natural pleasure. Pornography is the most powerful and most dangerous accelerator of the male dopaminergic system. It turns pleasure into an artificial stimulus so intense that the brain begins to confuse fantasy with reality. And when that happens often, the body responds in devastating ways: natural desire weakens, penile sensitivity drops, and real pleasure loses strength. When you watch porn, the brain releases a massive amount of dopamine. But unlike real physical pleasure, this stimulus doesn't require effort, connection, or emotion. It's immediate, easy, and limitless. Each video, each new scene, each image change represents a fresh chemical peak. And the brain quickly learns it can get pleasure with a simple swipe. That process is called dopaminergic hyperstimulation, and it's what destroys the ability to feel true pleasure. Over time, the brain builds tolerance. It needs more intense scenes and more extreme stimuli to reach the same level of arousal. The body pays the price. You struggle to get aroused with real partners, erections weaken, and pleasure becomes shallow. Dopamine is overused and testosterone falls. The result is an exhausted body and an anesthetized mind. Porn also distorts the natural rhythm of pleasure. In real sex, desire grows gradually, with touch, scent, breath. On screen, everything happens in seconds. The brain loses patience with the real process: it wants fast pleasure. And when you try to truly connect, it doesn't feel the same. That's why many men report psychogenic erectile dysfunction: the body works, but the brain won't respond. After your 30s or 40s, this effect is even more dangerous. Dopamine sensitivity is naturally lower, and intense visual stimuli amplify sexual fatigue. The brain saturates, and pleasure turns to apathy. You lose control of your own desire. Real pleasure, the kind that involves touch, eye contact, and connection, gets replaced by a conditioned reflex. The brain begins to associate pleasure not with the body, but with the screen. When that happens, natural pleasure dies. But the body is resilient. It can recover as long as stimulus becomes natural again. And the first step is recognizing the signs that masturbation and stimulus have stopped being healthy. And that's exactly what I want to show now, the signs your body gives when pleasure is turning into self-sabotage. The body always signals when something is drifting out of balance, and masturbation is no different. The problem is most men ignore these signs, believing daily masturbation is normal or even healthy. But when pleasure starts charging a price, the body speaks. It speaks through fatigue, loss of erection, lack of desire, and the feeling of emptiness after climax. The first sign masturbation has stopped being healthy is unexplained tiredness. It's that exhaustion that shows up even after a good night's sleep. You feel heavy, mentally slow, and moody. That's because dopamine and testosterone are being drained faster than your body can replenish them. The hormonal system goes into deficit and vital energy disappears. The second sign is declining erection quality. The penis mirrors circulation and hormonal strength. When the brain gets used to artificial stimuli and the body is forced to ejaculate constantly, penile nerves lose sensitivity and blood flow decreases. You notice erections aren't as firm, take longer to happen, and real arousal feels weak. The third sign is sexual apathy. Pleasure loses intensity, desire for real partners drops, and orgasm isn't satisfying. The brain responds less to natural stimuli because it's been conditioned to chase repetitive, artificial dopamine. The fourth sign is emotional, irritability, impatience, low mood, and even bouts of anxiety after climax. That's because prolactin rises and dopamine plunges post-ejaculation. When this repeats too much, the brain lives in a low dopamine state, and life starts to feel flat. And there's a silent but dangerous sign, loss of control. It's when you feel you need to masturbate, even without desire, just to relieve tension. At that point, pleasure stopped being a choice, it became a conditioned reflex. These signs don't appear overnight. They accumulate, and the body tries to compensate up to its limit. But when pleasure stops nourishing and starts draining, it's time to pause and rethink the pace. And that's what I want to show now, how to regain control, restore sensitivity, and turn masturbation into a healthy act again. Regaining control over pleasure doesn't mean stopping masturbation. It means doing it consciously, respecting body and brain. Pleasure is a powerful force, and when balanced, it becomes fuel for energy, focus, and vitality. The problem is when pleasure is used as an escape, fast, automatic, and absent. The secret is to make the habit natural again, not a compensation mechanism. The first step is to give your body and brain breaks. Dopamine needs time to recover. Reducing masturbation frequency, even for a few days, already allows hormone levels and the nervous system to reestablish. Temporary abstinence isn't repression, it's reprogramming. It's like hitting your brain's reset button. The second step is to swap artificial stimuli for natural ones. Porn distorts how the brain understands pleasure. It delivers fast dopamine without emotion. When you eliminate or reduce it, the brain resensitizes to real touch, scent, gaze, and connection. That's when true pleasure returns. The third step is to strengthen the body, because sexual energy comes from physical vitality. Strength training, especially activating the pelvic floor, boosts circulation, raises testosterone, and improves control over ejaculation. A strong body supports a balanced mind. The fourth step is to feed dopamine the right way. Quality sleep, sunlight, and a diet rich in protein, zinc, magnesium, and healthy fats help your brain produce dopamine naturally. That makes pleasure feel like pleasure again, not a compulsion. And the final step is to redefine your relationship with pleasure. Masturbation should be a choice, not a reflex. It should help you unwind, explore, and reconnect, not fill emotional voids. When you learn to feel your body, you know the right moment to stop, the right time to resume, and the balance between desire and rest. Healthy pleasure leaves you energized, not drained. It gives you clarity, not guilt. It strengthens, not weakens. And that's exactly what I want to say at the end of this video, because conscious pleasure is what keeps a man potent, balanced, and truly alive. Pleasure was made to strengthen a man, not to weaken him. But when it's lived without awareness, what should recharge you starts emptying you out. The body speaks, and the silence many men insist on keeping is what slowly destroys potency. Masturbation isn't the problem. The problem is when it turns into an automatic cycle, without pause, without awareness, without purpose. Conscious pleasure feeds vital energy because it's born of balance. It happens when body and brain work together, not in conflict. The man who learns to control his own pleasure rediscovers a kind of potency that doesn't depend on external stimuli. He feels more present, firmer, more in charge of his own body. That's true virility, not how often you ejaculate, but knowing when and why. Unconscious pleasure drains, conscious pleasure strengthens. A man who masturbates in a balanced way, without rush and attentive to his body, doesn't lose energy, he transforms it. He learns that orgasm is a point of renewal, not depletion. The result is visible: more focus, more firmness, more clarity, and above all, more self-mastery. I'm Emily Collins, a urologist, and I see this every day. Men who thought they were out of potency or out of desire discovered the issue wasn't the body, it was the mind. When pleasure is reprogrammed, the body responds. The penis reacts again, desire returns, and the energy that seemed lost comes back. Pleasure is the purest form of energy. It doesn't need to be denied, but it does need to be understood. When you learn to live pleasure in balance, you discover the secret of potency that doesn't run out, the kind that comes from within, not from excess. If you've made it this far, congratulations, it shows you care about your body and want to live pleasure consciously. Now, subscribe to the channel, because here I talk about male sexual health on a scientific basis, without taboo and in a direct way. Leave your like if this video helped you rethink your relationship with pleasure and comment below. I control my pleasure. And for those who stayed until the end, the next video is already on the screen. In it I explain how to reprogram your brain to recover potency and natural pleasure. Click and keep going with me, because understanding your body is the first step to mastering your energy.